Is anybody not ready? Observation 1 is the resolution analysis. The point is the resolution. The Supreme Military Council of Syria should negotiate with Bashar al-Assad. The B support is the framework. 1, fiat is an act of imagination necessary to allow both teams access to the debate. And the framework denies reciprocity and should be rejected. 2, the affirmative team has the right to define the resolution reasonably through the use of paramount with the burden of proving the resolution true. The opposite team must negate the affirmative proofs of the resolution. 3, policy net benefit is the best criterion for the debate as it allows both teams access to predictable burdens and methods of refutation. 4, discursive implications can be evaluated through the framework of the affirmative. If the methodology of the plan is flawed, the implications of the criticism should be a direct effect of plan's passage. 5, due to the fact that all words have a multiplicity of meanings, unless the affirmative's interpretation is shown to exclude the negative, it ought to be accepted in order to avoid silencing the PMC. 6, if the PMC is silenced through competing interpretations or framework shifts, the discursive implications are more immediate and must be paramount over the PMC discursive errors. Observation 2 is the background. The argument here is that the Supreme Military Council controls the Free Syrian Army. It's functioning as its own government. It's what's in opposition to Bashar al-Assad right now. Thus, observation 3, the plan. The Supreme Military Council of Syria will negotiate with Bashar al-Assad to stop the Syria government attacks on Syrian refugees. The Supreme Military Council of Syria will negotiate with Bashar al-Assad to stop the Syrian government attacks on Syrian refugees. Solvency. Negotiations will work. The first argument is that Assad was quoted as saying that political opponents don't carry weapons, which means that Assad is going to hold himself to the standard as well. What we are going to see is that Assad rolling back it is going to change the relationship between the two groups. The second argument is that Assad wants to be perceived by the international community as being willing to cooperate to retain allies in Russia and in China, because if he continues his hardline approach, he is going to lose the only support that he has right now. The third argument is that Assad is willing to give in. You can look to how quickly he gave up chemical weapons. He is trying to prove to the international community that he is rational, because the United States has begun to use the argument that Assad is irrational, and that is the method by which we alienate our political opponents in the international community. So he's trying to check back against that by looking rational. Advantage 1 is refugees. Basic point is the uniqueness. The first argument is that Syria has been placing landmines for the last 2 years, which is funneling people trying to leave Syria through a very small area. These landmines are specifically placed along the border to make it more difficult for refugees to get out. The second argument is that with winter approaching, it is limiting the path options due to the fact that most of the paths go through mountain passes, which are going to be covered in snow, so refugees are going to have to leave through very specific areas where they can actually get through the snow, where it's not too deep and where they won't get trapped. The third argument is that Syria is currently using snipers to pick off refugees. Essentially, they're just shooting people who they see leaving the country to try and stop the refugees. And the fourth argument is that the New York Times said that 100,000 people have already died of starvation in Syria, and that if they stay through the winter, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, will die as a result of starvation if they stay in Syria. The B point is the link. The first argument here is that negotiations begin. The second argument here is that Assad is going to agree to stop killing the refugees because it is going to serve to prove to the international community that he is rational. The third argument is that refugee attacks are going to stop as a result. The C point of the impacts, I'll get you at the bottom. The first argument under the impacts is that this is going to solve for the deaths of the refugees, because when the Assad agrees to stop shooting at them, then they're no longer going to die as a result of military action. The second argument is that this is going to allow for refugee mobility so that they have the ability to get out of Syria, because if they're no longer being persecuted by the Syrian government as they're attempting to leave, then they're no longer going to fear leaving, because they don't need to fear the snipers who would otherwise be shooting them. The third argument is that this is going to solve for the structural violence of individuals who are trapped in an unsafe region right now. There's a form of structural violence at the point in which they are being trapped in an area where they can't get access to food, where the government is persecuting them, where they're in a war-torn state and they don't have the ability to leave. The only way to solve this is to change the ability of the refugees to get out of the country. Your question?
In any world, why would Assad agree to this proposition? What is the warrant? You can't fiat Assad saying yes.
No, I'm not saying that we fiat Assad saying yes. I'm saying that all of the empirics recently show that Assad is trying very... I'm trying to get there, bro. All of the warrants recently show that Assad is trying to prove to the international community that he is rational, that his recent actions have been showing that he is trying to say to everyone, like, look, I'm not crazy like the United States is trying to tell you.
Also, he recently just said that we need to stop violence and start figuring out the solution.
Right, moreover, Assad just said we need to stop violence and start figuring out the solution. He's ready to move on. He's seeing hundreds of thousands of people dying in Syria, and he doesn't like that. Like, I mean, the dude's not an evil tyrant, okay? Like, he's trying to fix it. He's screwed up.
For sure.
Advantage 2. Advantage 2. What? Geneva 2. You can call this Geneva 2. Basic point is the uniqueness. The first argument is that the Geneva II Convention that is being held right now calls for negotiations to end the Syrian conflict and are happening now. The Forum for the Geneva II Conference has been established. The conference is specifically targeting the issues that are being seen in Syria right now. The second argument is that the Free Syrian Army won't join now. There was a conglomeration letter that was issued specifically by the leaders of the Army of Islam, who are members of the Supreme Military Council, who said that they will not attend the Geneva II Convention as long as Assad continues his insistence on killing. The basic point is the solvency. First, that the killing ends as a result of Assad's change. Second, that the Supreme Military Council sees the change in Assad's position towards Syrians. The third argument is that they are, as a result, going to join the Geneva II Conventions because they say the only structural barrier to them entering right now is Assad's killing of Syrian refugees. Of Syrians. So here are the impacts. The first argument is that both sides are Syria are going to join the Geneva II Conventions because they both want to see an end to the conflict, because hundreds of thousands of people dying is bad for both sides, specifically because it is targeting both sides at this, in the status quo. It is not just one side who is dying as a result. Both the Supreme Military Council and the Assad regime are losing massive numbers of people, and they want to find a way to solve this. The second argument is that this is going to start the enforcement of human rights in Syria because the Geneva II Convention is going to require the enforcement of the original Geneva Conventions, so they are going to need to comply to these, and as a result, Assad is going to have to change the way that he interacts with the Syrian refugees and begin to stop the massive human rights abuses that are happening in Syria right now if he wants to actually be able to see anything come out of the Geneva II Conference. And the third argument here is that this is going to help solve for the Syrian conflict because it will, because these negotiations will resolve the differences between the two. Specifically, they are looking at creating a more fair election system so that they can actually have a more legitimate ruler take power in Syria. So when we look to solve this, we are going to see is that once there is a ruler who is put in place, who is it is going to change the way that the Syrian government operates, and that it is going to be able to check back for the violence that's happening right now. Do you have anything for it? Okay, cool. On the solvency, again, like, Assad is trying desperately right now to prove his rationality. That's why he was willing to give up the chemical weapons so quickly. He is trying really hard to not do what Kim Jong-un did and look irrational to the international community.
Yep, it's going to be one off with, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pages. And then it's going to be the case number 5 before 6.
Ask for your starting case.
Yeah, it's just going to be the case number. So you can start, yeah. You can start with the solvencies. It's already done.
I need to get me one of those.
Did you have a special
True.
order? Did you have a special order?
I think mine is special orders. Anybody not ready? You guys ready?
Framework, our interpretation is a negative entitled to single conditional test of the method and methodological representation choice of the affirmative. The ace one is bad methodology, breeds bad policy. The question where should we be comes before what should we do? Because how we locate ourselves in the world around us determines how we respond to it. The next argument is if we assume violence is inevitable, then our behavior will facilitate violence. And the next argument is we will continue to excuse and ignore it in favor of imagination of random possible events while we sit by with an opportunity to expose authentic suffering. The basic point is endorsement grants legitimacy, determining whether the affirmative makes the material conditions where they describe worse is a prior question of the debate. And if we internally your advocacy in our framework, then you should have to defend yourself in terms of the root cause debate and how your advocacy affects the desirability of, or how your representations affect the desirability of your advocacy. The basic point is you should be able to justify your affirmative. You got 20 minutes to choose it, so you should be able to defend it. And also, this is not a new concept of debate. Representational methodological debate happens every round. It's just not a knowledge method acknowledged as much in the community. But the decent point is the question about what the world ought to look like is what debate is about, but it's not about what the world does look like. And even if all violence is inevitable, it's a poor excuse for refusing to strategize against violence and trying to be able to limit violence. And the thesis. The big other is the act of granting symbolic authority to the big other, which we will identify as state corporations and media and the other main institutions which exert controlling influence all over our lives, and their power is governed by our ability to acknowledge their existence and to be able to continually affirming it by imagining that they have complete domination over our lives, and also granting them godlike scientific objectivity. But the next argument is the argument is that we should deprive them of this precarious lifeline, and by imagining they don't exist. But the link page. The first argument is the affirmative imagined existence of the big other. Imagining the Supreme Military Council will solve for the people's woes is a divestment of agency, which is literally saying that people don't need to be able to fight back anymore because the SMC is going to negotiate with Assad, and somehow Assad is going to stop killing the 100,000 people that he has personally been responsible for killing in Syria, which is a pretty bad argument. But additionally, this act is not benign. It has a massive transformative value because the SMC has not been stopping Assad's actions. It is the people that are fighting back that is able to change what's happening in the status quo. In a world in which the people feel less empowered with the need to fight back because they believe Assad is going to stop killing people, this means that they will not create the force they need to be able to fight back, and the Syrian revolution won't work because they're just going to divest their agency to the SMC. The third argument is that they attach the value of life to a compulsory acceptance of the big other. Look, the SMC is going to do this, and Assad is going to say yes and stop killing 100,000 people because he's willing to give up power and have free elections. Come on. The fourth argument is a symbolic admission assumes that godlike scientific objectivity, i.e. the SMC knows what type of negotiations that should take place with Assad, and that these negotiations are somehow going to lead to him being willing to give up his power. The nation, instead of each individual being able to take their own agency and see the only way for us to be able to solve, overwhelming way to be able to solve back by looking into the issues themselves, the impacts. The first argument is the impact framework. Our impact framework says that gestures representing unbelievable possibilities, such as imagining the big other doesn't exist, are a prerequisite to minimizing violence in all its form. But the second argument is fiat-centric arguments absolve guilt because they're predicated on somebody else acting for us, like the SMC, which means that we don't have to really look into things ourselves or be able to take real action or imagine how these things are really affecting people. The third argument is our impact framework invokes a comparative assessment of the root cause of violence. The little basic point is even if institutions are inevitable, it's how we relate and reassociate ourselves to those institutions that can be able to understand how we can really be able to make them work in the best way for us. And the little basic point is also searching for desirable conditions for those who are marginalized in the status quo is worth it, and a 1% risk calculus is not desirable because it's just an arrogant situation of individuals as chess pieces in which they necessarily lose their value of life when we say that there's going to be 1% risk calculus for nuclear war or for war if we're not able to solve that. Second argument is that we shouldn't award rationalizations of unimaginable catastrophes because like I said, cross-apply my last
Keep
argument.
going on.
The fourth argument is the loss of being is the greatest possible impact claim. The little exit point of this it's like an ongoing nuclear war in your head because you're being situated as a chess piece in which you literally have no control over your life. And imagining the big others doesn't exist, one way to be able to solve back for this. And also in a world in which we need to look at our ontology first because it's the only way that we can be able to prevent annihilation. We believe this is true. The alternative. Vote negative to engage in an act of imagination from the starting point that the big other does not exist. Vote negative to engage in an act of imagination from the starting point that the big other doesn't exist. Solvency. The first argument is that this is literally requires voting negative. Any permutation will still legitimize institutional action as per the affirmative, which is a critical instance of accepting the big other. Otherwise, they would sever out the affirmative, which kills the LOC. And this is also the only negative speech for our offense, which means that the affirmative gets golden turn to the PMR. The next argument is going to be that this signifies a key political stance. What does this read? The ballot is a better way. It says who did the better debating, and it is done by X, which means that this is an authentic opportunity to be able to pass this and expose this invisible violence that's occurring right now. But the third argument is the affirmative imagination of the big other penetrates these modes of violence and is only by breaking down the epistemological foundations of the big other can we be able to solve back and give real agency back to ourselves. The status quo. The fourth argument is our our method demystifies the big other because our alternative embraces the perspective that the big other does not exist. The demystification is key to being able to eradicate false ideologies and that are imposed by the current power structures, and the alternative is the only way to be able to have a starting point. Case. Assad says that he wants to be seen as they are making arguments that Assad wants to be seen as a rational actor in the status quo, and empirics shows that Assad doesn't want to use violence. This is probably not a very good what?
Go to their framework argument.
Okay.
They say that fiat is an act of imagination, but no, fiat is the very thing that strips us of our autonomy in the realm, because they say no.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, they say fiat is an act of imagination. However, you can cross-apply from our framework that when we engage in fiat, it imagines that we are someone else, which indicates that we cannot have autonomy in our own action because we are imagining that we are acting through someone else's agency, which means that we can never be able to solve back because we cannot get the correct social location of the world to how we relate to the problems. And also, they say that the affirmative. They also say the policy is the best discourse of because it has discourse of implications. But cross-apply our framework. On advantage 1.
No solvency.
They can never be able to solve for structural violence because they're imagining that SMC will be able to solve back for the people, and also that their nebulous arguments about how Assad would be willing to agree to negotiations to stop killing the people and agree to new elections. That all of the indication of that killing of 100,000 people and the literally sniping refugees that are trying to leave is an indication that he will do anything to keep from losing power, especially when the entire international community is bearing down on him. This is the reason that he's doing this. It's not to be able to have an election next month, because what's going to happen is he's probably going to get put to the gas chamber of the national community. And also, you can cross-apply this argument to the Geneva advantage. He's not going to sign the Geneva. The rebels know this. That's why.
On our case on top, we go solvency.
Can you do this one second? Sorry, I really go over these pieces of paper.
What's that?
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
Alright, sorry about that.
So it's going to be solvency, advantage 1, advantage 2, our framework, their framework, the alternative, the links, the impacts.
You should sign first when you get to the critique.
I should.
have that on one thing.
When you say solvency, do you mean critique solvency or
And
solvency?
our solvency.
Okay.
And I have the alternative and the alternate solvency floated on one, so that's just all of it.
Okay.
This one, and I'll sign this. Everybody ready? You say that Assad's not going to negotiate. You can see our specific analysis first. Assad wants to have the support of the international community, specifically in allies such as Russia and China, that are necessary for Assad to retain power. We say that this is the necessary internal link as to why he's going to be giving up and negotiating these specific negotiations. Also, want to extend across the empirical warrant that he gave up his chemical weapons means that he's willing to negotiate the status quo. These are both empirical reasons that the negative dropped out of the PMC. Additionally, they want to extend across our specific. That was the key time argumentation. The report is saying that political opponents do not carry weapons. This means that Assad is held to the same standard on this question in any form of negotiation. Means this is why negotiations are to function in the status quo. Their only argumentation is that he's sniping refugees. To say that this he's only continuing this in order to retain power. We say that this means that by stopping this and allowing for an open negotiation, this is always going to be able to solve. Additionally, you say this that the K turns solvency. We say that we'll answer that. Okay. On advantage 1. I want you to extend across a couple of specific arguments here. First, I want you to extend across the entirety of the advantage 1 that goes completely conceded. However, I want you to look to our rhetoric on this position. We say that these negotiations are happening in sort of for the Free Syrian Army, specifically the individuals within the army, in order to be able to be able to stop this violence. We are not constructing the big other in this instance. We say that individuals, those that are being affected by this as refugees, are always going to be the necessary internal link in order to be able to be able to link in your criticism.
The SMC is a coalition of individuals
individuals checking back against the big other.
Also, we articulate the SNC as a coalition of individuals that are necessarily key to check back against the big other. This is necessary. We articulate this out of the MC can tell you that the conglomerate in the conglomerate letter sent to the Geneva Convention is necessarily a group of individuals that are working together in order to be able to stop this, not a one-shot kill in order to be able to stop this. And these we necessarily do turn your position. Next to advantage 2, extend across all these argumentations says that individuals need to negotiate within the international community, not just the big other, but also in the other individuals and the many groups that need to come together in order to be able to solve this. Means that we are not linking into your position. In fact, we'll probably turn it by bringing down some understanding. We'll make those arguments on the link. Go to our framework. A couple arguments I want you to see here. First, extended argument that says the policy of methods is the best framework for the debate because it opens up for the best predictable burdens of methods of reputation. You can see this argumentation. Also, want you to extend across our fourth argument that says the discourse can be evaluated under our framework, but it has to come as a direct result of our planned passage. It means that you need to evaluate your impact, but we need to weigh ours against yours and the impact framing. Also, I want you to extend across our number 5 that says that any form of framework shift is always going to be silencing the PMC and rejecting eliminating our access to impact. It means that you should not be evaluating this. And you can see the independent voting issue on the bottom. It says that the PMC silence and the impacts are always more immediate and always should be rejected in order to allow access to debate. You say that fiat strips us of our ability to engage in autonomy itself. No, we say that first we are not claiming to fiat for the entirety of solvency. It means that we are actually engaging in our own personal advocacy through this act. Additionally, second one, she said when we say that fiat is an act of imagination to allow us to actually engage with these straight structures in order to be able to break them down. We say that this necessary role playing is always going to be preferable first because actually engaging in state structures are necessary to break them down. Specifically, you have to understand the structure before you can eliminate it. Additionally, second, say that this is necessary the key internally in order to be able to solve that for all of your argumentation. Say that we are taking personal responsibility for our speech actions. Right? It means we are necessarily breaking this down. We act as policymakers because we think that we will be policymakers in the future. It means that we solve that for your argumentation. Go to framework. Their framework. I wish to cross-apply argumentation says that fiat is an act of imagination, that we are taking personal responsibility. It means that we get to evaluate our understanding and our rhetoric against yours because we are necessarily functioning under framework. Additionally, second point to cross-apply argumentation is the role play is good. You can make an argumentation about why discourse comes first. Say that we necessarily our discourse allows us to engage within these state structures and necessarily being able to solve back for all of your argumentation. Additionally, this means we get to weigh the impacts of our affirmative against the impacts of your criticism. Go to the alternative. First argument is going to be the permutation. Perm do both. Perm do both. Let me rephrase that. My bad. Perm do the plan on non-competitive parts of the alternative. Perm do the plan on non-competitive parts of the alternative. First argument is that these two things are not mutually exclusive. Specifically, we can eliminate the aspect that says, to strike about aspect that says vote negative. We can say that you can engage in our plan and also engage in active imagination that is necessary, that the starting point to eliminate the big other means this necessarily is able to solve back for all of your argumentation. Your argumentation on why vote negative is not going to function in this round. Additionally, the second argument is the dogmatism that we say the dogmatism is going the dogmatic nature of the dogmatic ideology of the criticism is going to eliminate solvency and decrease any chance of cooperation. Specifically, the second wave feminism movement proves because the second wave feminism movement excluded the narrative of black women and other individuals who had a different narrative. This caused the movement to fracture and collapse on itself, only allowing yet other ideologies and understandings of the world like can necessarily be able to solve issues. Third, we say the turning portion of that benefit. We are able to get within inside the structures that you claim to the big other. I'll get you to the bottom in order to be able to break them down, in order to be able to solve them overall. This means that only by allowing in our ideology, working within the systems, are able to solve. The Occupy Wall Street movement proves in this case because the fact that the Occupy Wall Street movement proves that relentlessly criticizing the outside is never able to break down the state structures that you are claiming are happening. The only way to solve it is to work within the system in order to break it down. Additionally,
the fourth net benefit is that by ending these killings and imagining that the big other doesn't exist, we probably solve best.
Additionally, fourth is that by breaking down our understanding of the big other and by saying that we need to stop this instance of killing is the reason why we probably are breaking down this structure best by saying that we need to take allow for individuals to make their own personal agency in order to be able to stop the violence that's happening and in order to be able to stop the overall structural problems on the alternative.
You can cross-apply my refugee mobility to that.
You can cross-apply the refugee mobility argument because we are saying that agency is necessary and that mobility is the key internal link to agency. If you can't make your own choices and move yourself, then there's a reason why you necessarily will always be captured within the structures of the big other. I'll take your question quick.
Yeah, explain your second benefit.
The second benefit on Trojan horse or dogmatism. Dogmatism. The argument is that by the dogmatic ideology of the criticism that we have to reject in every instance always causes the movement, and the arguments that you are claiming should fall apart in the empirical warrants of second feminism movement. On the alternative side, They say that vote negative is key. The first argument is that you don't have to vote negative. We say that you can still engage within these same structures and actively engage in this act of imagination. There's no reasons why the negative is key, especially when we are going to win the link level. Additionally, you say that the ballot is currency. You say that no, the ballot is not function as currency in this debate. Specifically, this the ballot is not a currency. You can engage in their argumentation, and if you do engage in their argumentation, then you can write on the ballot that we should break them down to structure the big other, and then also do the plan. There's no reason why the negative balance key I'm not going to get to you. Also, in addition, you say that you link into your criticism for a couple of reasons. First, you construe the judges as the other, saying they need to give you your ballot in order to be able to break down these structures necessary. It means that you are necessary linking your criticism. Additionally, second, you say you link into your criticism because you construe the affirmative as the big other by saying that you are all the big ones that are going to solve all the problems and causing all these problems. All these things means that you and your construction of us and our relationship to us and say that we are not individuals but are rather a monolith is reasons why you are necessarily linking back into your criticism. Go to the links. The first argument here is that we are breaking down the big other, that is Assad. We say that Assad is characterizing the international community, the entirety of Syria, and we said that we're breaking down the structure by allowing for individuals for him to take personal responsibility for his actions necessary and called fully accountable for his actions necessary. We are breaking down the big other in this instance. Additionally, the second here is the term that we actually are describing individuals in a way that allows them to characterize their own agency. Our arguments on Refugee Mobility Act is a term here by saying that we allow individuals to claim their own agency to break down the monolithic structures that they've enforced. We say that our entirety of our advantage one claims that they are stuck within the structures that you are saying are happening. We say that we're getting people out of the system that is causing them violence. Means we are necessarily straight to your critique. Additionally, the third argument here is we are describing individuals the ability of all individuals to engage through democracy as reasons why the people take the agency for themselves.
It's going to be the criticism in the order of the framework, the links, the terms, alternative, solvency, and the impacts. Anyone need that again?
Yeah, sure, one more time.
Yeah. It's going to be the framework, the links, then it's going to be the terms, then the impacts, and then I'll go to Advantage 1 because they make some sort of argument that it gets probably this, but I'll let you know.
Oh.
Say that.
Embarrassing.
They're really cool with the laps. And the little stands like on top.
I think that's what it's actually made for.
Yeah.
Because it has a little thing on top.
Yeah. Busting out your
There you go.
Yeah, it's going to be
That'll be good enough.
our framework, links,
They're not
terms, solvency,
There we go.
impacts. After the impacts, you could go ahead and throw their framework on top of the Advantage 1, and then I'll talk about Advantage 1. Sorry, I'm going to change that one more time. Throw their framework on top of the whole debate.
Put what framework?
Their framework.
Okay.
On top of our framework. Want to switch one more time?
Okay, anyone not ready? Your discussions of fiat don't matter in the fact that the fiat that you use does not break down the state as the same as the alternative, which means that we still function within your actual framework and we're an internal link turn to your case that you drop within our framework. So that means that we are going to be a internal link turn to your app, which means that we're going to outweigh you at the end of the debate. Go on to our framework. You can quote Volcker the bad method creates bad policy. This goes Cole can see which indication that they will create this bad policy that we are articulating within link pages to go also be this that too. The alternative, you say that cross-play fiat is active imagination, but you don't imagine that the state doesn't exist. You imagine in the existence of the state. That is the tool of the state to steal your autonomy. That is the thesis of this entirety of, that's the thesis of the criticism. You say that role-playing is going to be good, but role-playing also isn't going to be good because it's been corrupted by fiat. We must realize our authentic suffering within this round in order to break down these types of power structures, to realign ourselves to the state and create a reorientation so that we can reattribute the value to life to ourselves and take it back away from the state who dictates it to individual people. And you can pull across an endorsement for legitimacy because we are an internal link to your app, which means that if we prove we are the root cause of your case, you have to justify your app and defend it, which you don't, which means that you can't win this round. So you can sign a bell there if you want. But also, you must look to how the world ought to look like, not the world should look like, which is the act of what the debate should function as. Go on to the links. Your first argument's turn is that actually basically all the arguments say the same thing on this link page. You say that the Assad is going to be able to solve because he wants to show the international community that he's willing to do this, and the agency through mobility is going to be able to solve. There's a few answers to this. First is that you can see that there is no value to life. There's no value to life in the world of attributing that to the state, but you attribute state action to value of life, which means there is none, which means there's no impacts to any of these terms on top of that, and they're going to be terminally non-unique. And on top of that, agency is a moot point because the only way to stop after agency is through the world of the alternative. Also, you can pull across the entirety of the link page and set the app, imagine the world of the background, which means that this is going to be a dissat to the perms at the end of the day because it's never going to be able to solve back independently. It's never going to be able to solve back in the world of the perm. Also, you can pull across that this is a massive transported value. Basically, what is happening in the world of the plan is that they say that this individual group that's running the rebel army is going to be able to solve back to the negotiations. Thus, the rebels won't find an incentive to fight anymore, which means Assad is going to take them over, straight turning the entirety of their app. Also, you can pull across that the app, they attach the value of life to the acceptance of the big government, which is going to be the number one, biggest net deficit to the perm debate. Go on to the perms now. You can group these arguments, and these are going to be the dissets. First is that it's going to be technocratic idealists. A little later here is that they blindly wed themselves to the Supreme Military Council, which it has to take this action in order to solve back for these. But this has to be held suspect to these actions because this is what is going to strip the individuals of autonomy caused by analysis about how the individuals will stop fighting the regime, and this will cause Assad to lash out even harder in the status quo because there are no warrants that say that Assad won't lash out in the status quo, which means that they can't control the direction to this. And the next is that it's going to be that the exceptionalism. A little later here is that perm creates a state of exception. Or exceptionalism, that's the exception, where the rule of the alternative, the perm carves out an exception in the world of the alt that can never solve back for itself, which means that the impacts will still arise in the world of the perm. And the little bit here is the impacts are always going to be supercharged by the perm because it's going to link harder to this because the dominant association with the state. Also, the number 3 link is also, cross-play, but the number 3 link, the attached value lies to the compulsory acceptance of the big other. This is going to be pretty terrible because the state is always going to be seen as solving back for the war when in actuality, Assad is just going to attack them even more. The next is I think the perm is going to be anti-dialogical discourse. A little way in here is that the oppressors cannot solve for the oppressed. The oppressors cannot say, hey, oppressed, you're not oppressed anymore. The oppressed individuals acting together have to solve back, and that is what the world of status quo is doing. And the alternative is the only way that you can solve for the Syrian conflict, literally, because the individuals are going to be able to free themselves from this autocratic regime. Also, the alternative is going to that's fine. Okay. Another insight to the premise is that we create a critical fracture to solve back first, and Howard Zinn writes that the democratic space was only opened up when the movements lost their faith in the broken system and pressures on the liberal elites to open up the space. If you look at labor movements and women's rights, this was an indication that there must be a critical fracture in order to solve back for these types of instances. Go on to the perm proper. Obviously, all of these impacts, you can cross the critical fracture to the Trojan horse is never going to be able to solve because the state is always going to subvert the internal structures of the movement because they can go in and see what the individual alternative is going to do in order to subvert it. This is an argument that is going to happen because the individuals aren't going to claim themselves as going to be able to solve back for their autonomy because the state can solve for all because they are God. Next is assaultancy. Actually, no. Cross-play assaultancy number 3. Also, the affirmative. The perm can't break down the epistemological foundations of the big other, and the first argument that goes against Cole can see that any permutation will still legitimize the institutional actions after the affirmative in this critical instance, which means that literally in no world can they solve back through this through the permutation. Go on to the impacts. Actually, no, I was on the solvency page. Okay. The second argument is that this is a key political stance. You say that this is not, the ballot is not going to be key for this political stance, but the ballot says that the individuals who best free the press is going to be able to solve back for these authentic suffering to visibilize this violence that is invisible in the status quo, and the perm is always going to make this even more invisible. And also, the perm is never going to break down the epistemological foundations of the affirmative, and they don't demystify the big other. Cross-apply perm number 4 to the, or cross-apply sovereignty number 4 to the perms as well. Demystification is the prior question in order to retaining agency. They mystify the big other into saying that they are going to resolve every conflict, period. Which is what strips us of our autonomy to begin with and causes the root cause, or it is the root cause of the violence of their impacts. And on the impact, you can pull across the arguments that fiat-centric based education is what it strips us of our autonomy. This means it's going to co-opt any type of their framework arguments that they're going to get up here and try to pounce and try to get access to their impact, but they don't justify to you about how we aren't and internally turn the affirmative, or they don't justify their methodologies to you, which means that you always have to hold the world to the advocacy suspect, which means that you have to vote for the alternative. Also, you can pull across the root cause violence, the root cause violence arguments about how we must reorient ourselves to the big other in order to stop back. And basically, it's not, the state and institutions are inevitable. We just say, the alternative offers a new cognitive mapping in order to realign ourselves with the state. Because we attach the value of life to state action. They say state has to take action in order to resolve the refugees being killed. That means that the Syrian rebels are going to say, hey, we don't have to fight anymore because our council is going to stop back. So they pull back. Assad goes forward and kills everyone. Basically, the thesis of the argument, which means that we're always going to outweigh any chance of any impact that they're trying to weigh on us. And you can pull across the loss of being is the worst impact in the round. At the end of the day, you're always going to be voting on the loss of being is the worst possible impact ever. Because you can always come back from nuclear annihilation. But in a state of ontological damnation, you don't have yourself. You are not yourself. You are basically just a body, a binary used by the state in order to propagate action that justifies them. And if they try to make this argument on coalition buildings, on the internal link, on the advantage, when they can never solve, because these refugees will only be killed worse in the world of the plan, because Assad is going to attack once the actual rebels pull back, because their autonomy is no longer with them.
It's going to be an overview, then the perm debate, wherever that is. Yeah. Yeah, so the perm debate, then it's going to be, actually, you know what? Let's put the overview, their framework, perm debate, our framework, and the all self, and then our effects. What? Yeah. Save you also.
Can I get that one more time?
So it's going to be an overview, your framework, the all solvency front page, our framework, solvency debate, or our solvency, and then the our page. Ready?
The fiat they use imagines the all-powerful, godlike scientific objectivity of one of the most powerful Syrian institutions. This means that this is the SMC, which means our framework the internal link turns their affirmative. Our imagining the big other exists and imagining ourselves acting as the big other can never be able to solve. Like the perm, it does not make sense. You cannot gain solvency from the single act of imagining the big other doesn't exist, which is the only way to be able to create the own space in your mind to create a critical fracture. You can cross-apply Reed's arguments about this, is the only way that we've been able to create actual movements, because this is the only way to, if you have any notion that the state is going to solve for you, that the SMC is going to solve for you, you will not mobilize in the streets, you will not take every possible action to make yourself free and take full responsibility. And all of their arguments about how they take personal responsibility with their framework for imagining that the SMC exists, or imagining that SMC can take the action, indicates that they divest their agency to the SMC because they are imagining themselves acting within the SMC.
None of these questions matter. Go on to the perm comparison of the impacts.
I'm there.
That's
I'm there. Also, the first permutation net benefit I want you to extend is the critical fracture. This is the only way that we can create space, and you can extend Howard Zinn's arguments in the People's History of the United States, who chronologizes, whatever the word is, the movement that created a democratic space in the United States. He writes that only the way that we got any democratic rights, laws, or space in the United States was by people ceasing to have any faith in the government and institutions in the state, and organizing together and working from outside, making the elites fear them by getting large enough movements, by realizing that they only had agency within themselves. This is the only way to be able to create movements, because you can cross-by Reed's argument about the suffragists, about Mother Jones walking with 10,000 children down Washington, being able to stop child labor, and things like getting the 8-hour workday. Literally anything you can imagine that has created more rights has been ceasing to imagine the state as being able to solve for you. But also, also, the perm can never solve, because the state can, I want you to extend your reason net benefit argument about how the state can be able to know everything about the act of imagining. If you are the state, and you're imagining that the state doesn't exist, then the state will be able to know everything about the act of imagining and all of its strategies, and also about the movements that it will create, and will be able to subvert them. There are occupying examples. You can look at those examples and find that there was like a lot of accusations of police coming in and subverting the internalization of the movement, and being able to derail it. On the state of exception, you can extend the argument that supercharges that this is going to be able to supercharge the link, because the state will always co-opt the movement, which means you can never solve back with the permutation, and it's anti-dialogical, because it pacifies the people. Like, we are going to gain complete agency by demystifying our relation to the big other, but at the same time we're going to imagine the big other acting for us, and be able to solve back things for this. You're not going to grant them any leeway on their framework arguments, because all they say is that that framework or fiat is an act of imagination, but they still that is the link to our argument. They imagine the big other exists, and also we're not shifting out of any arguments, and the policy arguments don't matter. On the alternative solvency. Okay. They say that these aren't mutually exclusive. You're going to be voting them down on the perm debate, because the dogmatic ideal that we cannot be able to work with each other doesn't make any sense here. Because the only way that we can be able to get rights, like we want to create a critical fracture with individuals that are willing to divest agency into themselves. Like, you don't want to work with the individuals that are trying to subvert you, which means no movement for rights or no more individual agency has ever been created by working with the oppressor to create more rights for yourself. That is the argument here. That is the reason they can never be able to solve that.
I'd like an overview on top. My framework sheet, their framework sheet, the link page, and wherever you flow the perm debate. Sorry, alt solvency on top, and then the perm debate. Or things like that. Yeah. There's going to be an overview on top. My framework, your framework, the links page, the alternative solvency, the perm debate. Anybody not ready? Starting off with the overview, the first argument that you need to look to is that my opponents muted the PMC, that my specific argumentation straight out of the PMC is that if the PMC is silenced and they don't touch on it as a result of their change in the framework, that this is a reason to reject them. When they never interact with this argument and they barely even put any ink on the PMC, then this is a reason to reject them. Norcross, in your philosophy, you say you hate the criticism for this exact reason, that they don't interact with the argumentation of the affirmative, and that we need to reject them for this reason. But second, their rhetoric links to the criticism. When they say that the words in the round are the most important because they change our epistemology, when they drop the argument that they are constructing the judge as the big other in the room, and they say that we need to look to the rhetoric in the room first, that is going to be a reason why you are rejecting the negative team, because the criticism actually creates all of the problems that they are talking about. And when they say that we first need to evaluate in-round argumentation, then their specific rhetoric, their speech act, constructed you as the big other, and thus is a reason to reject them, because the way that they approach this issue just reifies the problem, and in fact makes it worse in the debate today. And when they drop that argumentation, we're going to be winning there. Let's look at the framework. On the framework, again, you can extend the PMC silencing argument at the bottom of my framework. Right. Moreover, we can extend all of course argumentation about the personal responsibility, how we're embracing the responsibility to change Bashar al-Assad's actions, and moreover that we're breaking down his power over individuals, and that as a result we are not constructing the big other, we are interrogating the big other, and so we don't link to the criticism as the result of the way that we're talking about it.
Whatever. The no link due to his rhetoric is a completely new argument in PMR.
No, that's what Corey was saying when he was talking about how we're breaking down, or we're interrogating the structure of Assad. Corey, how exactly did you phrase it?
That was on the link level, but the argumentation that he's going for is that we take personal responsibility for the Speech Act and the use of fiat. That's the, that's framework number one. Yeah, exactly.
That's a bigger consideration. All right, I'll do that back in the same level. You can move on to their framework sheet now. So is that okay for you? Cool. Onto their framework sheet. You can extend all of course argument about how role-playing is good because we need to be able to engage in the structures in order to be able to actually interrogate them. When they never interact with this argumentation, there's a reason why we need to be able to actually get into the structures in order to be able to change it. So if we wish to ever be able to break down the big other, we need to understand how to interact with the big other so that we can begin to break it down. So the only way that we can possibly solve is through the affirmative team, because we are the only team that actually allows us to get inside of the structure and interrogate it. You get there, Corey?
Yeah.
Cool, on to the links.
First link term, we break down.
Right, you can extend Corey's first link term that we actually break down the structure of the big other, that the policy of the affirmative is to, or the advocacy of the affirmative is to break down the control that Assad has over individuals. That is not creating the big other, it is ending his control over these individuals, and this is solving back for the impacts that they're describing, where this individual is having control over other people. When we do this, then our Speech Act is engaging in the criticism in a positive light. Moreover, the second argument that you can look to is where they make, I think it's their second argument on the links, they say that agency is a moot point here. He like blips this out for a second, but that's really not good for the criticism. Like, agency is the key aspect of the criticism, that individuals need to have their own control, and that the big other is creating a system that controls these individuals. When we create more agency for these individuals, specifically through refugee mobility, and we allow them out and they never interact with this argumentation, then they're never going to be winning the debate today, because we're attempting to solve back for the big other by getting these individuals away from the big other and breaking down the big other that exists in Syria. The second argument that you need to look to is the argument that they make where they say the rebels are going to stop fighting and Assad's just going to take over, but like, that's never going to happen. The rebels aren't going to just let Assad steamroll them. Like, it's been happening for 3 years that they've been fighting back against Assad. They're not just going to be like, okay, cool, you own us now. Like, there is no reason to believe this argumentation. The empirics simply deny that argument. On to the alternative solvency. You can extend Corey's argumentation about how they link to the criticism by constructing the judges as the big other in the round today, and moreover, when they say that the rhetoric needs to come first, and you are going to reject the criticism at this aspect. When they never interact with this argumentation, it is damning for the criticism because it constructs the criticism as the largest source of creating the big other in the round today, and when they never interact with that, they are losing the debate.
Where is that? On the outside.
Corey reads it on the alt solvency. It's the second argument he makes. Alright, on the perm. The first argument they make against the perm is that this creates idealism, but you can cross-apply Corey's argumentation about how dogmatism is always going to break down the structure. When they don't provide any warranted Corey proves to you that attempts at breaking down structures have already failed as a result of dogmatism, you're going to be believing our argumentation because it was warranted through the second wave feminism. The second argument they make is that the perm creates exceptionalism. However, we are not creating exceptionalism. What we're doing is trying to actually solve the problem, which is really what the criticism needs to be looked into. The third argument is that Assad is that, they say that Assad attacks are going to increase, but you can cross-apply the argumentation that the rebels aren't just going to roll over. The fourth argument of the day is that oppressed individuals need to free themselves, but that is exactly what we're doing. We're trying to give the refugees mobility so that they can free themselves, and that is exactly the argument that we're going for. The fifth argument is that they're saying this is going to lead to a critical fracture, but you can cross-apply Corey's dogmatism net benefit. Moreover, you can extend the Trojan horse net benefit.